Okay, so I don't know what you were doing on election night, but this was me. This was me, November 8th, 2016, right around when I realized what was going on. I'm sure all of you can remember where you were, who you were with, how you were feeling. For me, I'd say it was disbelief, anger, sadness, all in one, and all also broadcasted on live national television. A professor of mine later made the Michaela Maroney profound disappointment comparison, which I thought was pretty appropriate. I had a white ribbon pinned to my chest, white, the color of suffragettes. And if you looked up, you could still see the confetti that they had prepared to fall. And I later learned it was actually cut to look like shards of glass to symbolize the breaking of the highest, hardest glass ceiling. What I had expected to be a fairy tale night quickly began feeling like a Shakespearean tragedy. You see, at this point, I actually had been organizing and volunteering for 3 years to elect Hillary Clinton as our first female president. Both that amount of time and commitment, the valuable female friendships and mentorships I had gained, and most importantly, everything I believed was at stake in this election, made it all feel incredibly personal. This election made us confront the lack of women in politics in a way unlike ever before, and with stakes unlike ever before. At most times, Hillary Clinton's candidacy to become the first female president felt unextraordinary, which is really a testament to how far we've come and progress we've made, but also our complex relationship with gender and leadership and Hillary Clinton herself as a trailblazer. Oftentimes when I said I supported Hillary Clinton because she would be the first female president, I was asked to justify that statement. So let's take a look back and look at some statistics to understand the scope of this problem and really why it's such a big deal. I've learned that while many people care about this problem and know women are underrepresented, they're still shocked and surprised by how much. So currently, women make up about just under 20% of seats in Congress, just under 25% of seats in the state legislature, just under 21% of mayors, and just under 24% of statewide executives. So to put this in perspective internationally, when you compare how many women are serving in Congress or the legislature of different countries, the US isn't in the top 25 or the top 50, maybe the top 75, no kidding. They're not even in the top 100, but coming in at 104. So a lot of research has been done trying to explain this, and it really comes down to the fact that women are far less likely than men to run for office or show political ambition. And since women are less likely to run, they're less likely to be elected, and this is the foundation really for the political gender gap. So why are women less likely to run? Well, over the course of many years, women experience what we refer to as gender socialization. Over time, women start to internalize many subconscious negative views about women in leadership, internalizing the lack of women they see in politics in the form of fear, lower confidence, and aversion to risk-taking. There's a 2012 study that looks at this gap in political ambition across age groups and comparing men and women. And as you can see, they find that at age 13, men and women share relatively similar rates of political ambition, but that by age 25, when it comes to actually running, about 70% of men are still interested compared to 40% of women. So my own research substantiates this. Over the course of 2 years as a university scholar and for my honors thesis, I've collected data about over 5,000 state legislative districts across the country. And for each district, I indicated if a woman ran in that district and if a woman if a woman was elected and represents that district, in addition to a series of variables that differed from district to district that are institutional, socioeconomic, and cultural in nature. And what I found is that using this sort of statistical factor analysis, it's easier to explain the probability that a woman runs for office rather than that she wins. So this sort of serves the common held notion that the low likelihood of running is a major barrier. And the factors I found to be significant were 1, the availability of political opportunity, and 2, more cultural factors. So more education, more diversity, and less traditional views, more progressive views about women's traditional roles. So why does this all matter if it's not readily apparent to you? Well, the lack of women in politics has profound implications, not just for our politics, but our society. For one, we can't function as a representative democracy when 50% of our population is so drastically underrepresented. And of course, this problem is so much worse for women of color. Research and anecdotal evidence show that women politicians are more likely to get things done, more likely to compromise and work on a bipartisan basis, as we saw in 2013 with the government shutdown, when it was a bipartisan coalition of female senators and congresspeople that literally got government working again. Additionally, female politicians tend to be more in touch with the policy needs of women and families and their children. And in terms of the social implications, research shows that seeing a woman in a position of political power has sort of trickle-down empowerment effects by breaking stereotypes about females in positions of leadership. It can empower women in other historically marginalized professions. So to bring it back to this election, that's why it was incredibly important that not just all Americans, but young women in particular saw Hillary Clinton running for president, because this didn't only serve to normalize the idea of a female president and some of the subconscious views we all might hold about women in leadership, but it was incredibly important for young girls to potentially see themselves as a future candidate. As the saying goes, you can't be what you can't see. But the truth is that while we saw progress being made in this way, and we saw a woman running for president, while little girls were watching Hillary Clinton run, they also were watching the biggest double standard in American politics. So repeatedly throughout the campaign, you see Donald Trump being given the benefit of the doubt, taken literally but not seriously, whereas Clinton was held to a higher standard. Now, no matter your politics, and there are absolutely many reasons this election went the way that it did, you have to acknowledge there was different treatment between the two candidates, and that much of it was gendered in nature or had gendered origins. Going back as far as when Hillary Clinton was the First Lady of Arkansas, and people were uncomfortable seeing a Yale-educated career woman in that position. So there's actually a New York Times study that looked at the sort of shadow effect of this. They surveyed about and interviewed about 300 young girls and found that while this election inspired many of them to be interested in politics and pursue leadership positions, it also made a sizable portion less likely. Many of them indicated that seeing gendered criticisms of Clinton and the national dialogue on the national stage actually lowered their self-confidence and hurt their self-esteem, which for me is almost the most heartbreaking thing. I think that no young person in our country should ever feel discouraged from public life, especially by virtue of their gender. So on the more positive side of this, I would argue that the more positive long-term effect is that this election has also served as a catalyst. Immediately after, with the Women's March and across the country, we've seen how this election has inspired a new generation of young women to not wait and get involved in politics. Here at UConn, the annual Elect Her Young Women's Campaign Training was bigger and more diverse than ever before, and that's been the trend across the country. I would actually compare this to 1992, which has been called the Year of the Woman. This was the year following the controversial Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings, when many women across America were very frustrated with how male senators handled Anita Hill's allegations of sexual harassment and decided to take things into their own hand and run for Congress in record numbers. So, given what I said earlier about the importance of women running for office to solve this problem, it's critical that we keep up this momentum. So, I want to take a moment, and if you're a woman in the audience, I want to ask you to consider running for office. Now, even if you don't think of yourself as politically traditional or have any political experience, really don't worry about it. I mean, look at our current president. You probably do just as good, if not a better job. So there you go. I mean, whether your background is in science, health, education, we need your voices. It doesn't have to be Congress, although I hope it is. It could be a student government, town council, local board. And if you still are like, okay, I'm not a candidate, I want you to really think again, and I would like to ask you to maybe ask 2 to 3 women you know to consider running. On average, a woman needs to be asked 7 times before she takes that ask seriously. So going back to the night of November 8th, 2016, which I think many of us would rather not, but I have to admit that as I was waiting outside the convention center and early in the night, I had thought and hoped that I would be able to tell a future daughter of mine that not only did I vote for the first female president, but that I was there when it happened. And of course, this would be surprising because we would have had many female presidents by then. But that being said, while we can't go back, we can look towards the future. And I really believe that our generation can be the one that once and for all closes the gender political gap and truly makes our country's government by the people, for the people, and of the people. Thank you. Thanks.